This is your history lesson of the day brought to you by PBS.org. And whatever American experiences, I have not looked into the people, the funding, the whatever on this. This just random history. You may or may not be able to pull the reasons why I'm sharing this information, but it is information nonetheless, and it's part of history. Where it is written, if you like to worship the written word, it's written by PBS.org on the American experience, and this is on the Mountain Meadows Massacre. The image is the Mountain Meadows Image Critique Library of Congress, Prints and Photographs Division. Although Joseph Smith was no pacifist, he preached an aggressive self-defense against the Mormon Church's many enemies prior to September 1857. The Mormons had more often been the victims of violence than its perpetrators. That all changed with the darkest incident of the Mormon War, a series of attacks known as the Mountain Meadows Massacre. The Mormon War, the massacre, came about in the context of a rising conflict between Mormon leader Brigham Young and the federal government. When the Mormons had first arrived in Salt Lake area in 1847, it was Mexican territory, but the U.S. soon claimed the land after the Mexican-American War. The Compromise of 1850 made Utah a U.S. territory. Brigham Young was appointed its first territorial governor in 1850 and reappointed in 1854. But conflict soon developed between his theocracy and several non-Mormon officials who had been sent to the territory by the federal government. Those officials levied accusations of intimidation and the destruction of government documents against Young. From the beginnings of his presidency, James Buchanan judged it necessary to use force to assert federal supremacy in Utah. In the spring of 1857, he declared the territory in rebellion, and soldiers amounting to 20% of the entire American army began to march west that summer. For the Mormons, this approaching force raised the specter of past extermination orders and state-sanctioned violence against them, and Young's followers prepared for war. In August, the Mormon leader declared himself in defiance of all governments, but especially ours, "I will fight them, and I will fight all hell." And that's what was said. This is historical. Preparing for war. Young had a strategy for the coming war. Rather than fight the federal army directly, he would attack its supply trains as a show of his control over the territory. He would close the trails used by immigrants when they passed through Utah on their way to California. One way of achieving this was to forbid Mormons from selling any supplies to immigrants. Another was to allow friendly indigenous tribes, whom the Mormons had held in check, to harass wagon trains that passed through, specifically permitting the indigenous to take the cattle that so often accompanied the wagon trains. Although it is unclear whether Young explicitly ordered specific attacks on individual groups of migrants, the evidence suggests that in August, he did authorize local indigenous people to essentially have at the wagon trains. Furthermore, Young's inflammatory rhetoric may have pushed local Mormons over the precipice from hostility to overt violence. The Fancher Party. Into this maelstrom came an immigrant group from Arkansas, the Fancher Party, slowly making its way along a route some 200 miles south of Salt Lake. A popular Mormon missionary, Parley Pratt, had recently been unalived, his life taken, in the immigrants' home state, and as they moved through the Utah town of Cedar City, rumors spread of insulting behavior by the migrants. In the supercharged atmosphere of war, this was enough. Local Mormon militia decided to attack the immigrants with the assistance of Paiute indigenous people. They struck at dawn on September 7th, 1857, attacking the Fancher Party as it was encamped in the beautiful alpine valley of Mountain Meadows. And if you disagree with any of this information, feel free to write pbs.org on their American experience, and or stitch the video and provide your sources. The massacre. To the surprise of the militia leader John Lee and the men he commanded, the Fancher Party proved itself a formidable foe, circling wagons and fending off assaults for the next few days. Even more worrisome, the immigrants had seen that the Mormons were involved in the assaults, and this would undercut any later claims that the attack had been solely the work of indigenous people. Lee and his followers decided to take the life of anyone old enough to testify, and they set a trap. Lee's men offered the surrounded settlers safe passage out Then when the Arkansans agreed, the Mormons took the life of every man very unkindly for social media purposes. Every man, woman, and child over the age of 7, some 120 in all. The militiamen then took up a vow of silence and the cover-up began. The assaults would be blamed entirely on the Paiute people, and the truth would be concealed throughout the church hierarchy. Brigham Young himself would play a part. It almost sounds conspiracy cover-up, but they were actually conspiring. It wasn't a conspiracy, it was actual conspiring, which is a conspiracy, but not in the conspiracy theory sense of conspiracy. But hey, back to your history lesson of the day. The aftermath. As it turned out, the Mormon War ended quickly. U.S. soldiers marched unopposed through Salt Lake City in June 1858. Young accepted a new governor for Utah, and President Buchanan pardoned the Mormons for the rebellion. But the stain of the Mountain Meadows Massacre was not so easily erased. Lee remained a fugitive until November 1874 and went on trial for unaliving, taking life the next year. The trial ended in a hung jury. But then Young struck a deal with the U.S. attorney. In exchange for receiving evidence that would confirm Lee's guilt, the prosecutor agreed not to go after any other Mormons, nor seek to implicate the church hierarchy in the massacre. Lee felt betrayed, but in Young's words, "The time has come when they will try John D. Lee and not the Mormon Church, and that is all we have ever wanted." The militia leader was convicted in 1876 and executed in March 1877 at Mountain Meadows.